would have been more healthier minded in any other profession. I was always sorry for them, for in 9 cases out of 10 they were well-meaning persons. They were in the main very poorly paid. Their constitutions were as a rule above suspicion, and there were recorded numberless instances of their self-sacrifice and generosity, but they had the misfortune to have been betrayed into a false position, at an age for the most part when their judgment was not matured, and after having been kept in studied ignorance of the real difficulties of the system. But this did not make their position the less a false one, and its bad effects upon them were unmistakable. Few people would speak quite openly and freely before them, which struck me as a very bad sign. When they were in the room, everyone would talk as though all currency save that of the musical banks should be abolished, and yet they knew perfectly well that even the cashiers themselves hardly used the musical bank money more than the other people. It was expected of them that they should appear to do so, but this was all. The less thoughtful of them did not seem particularly unhappy, but many were plainly sick at heart, though perhaps they hardly knew it, and would not have owned up to being so. Some few were opponents of the whole system, but these were liable to be dismissed from their employment at any moment, and this rendered them very careful, for a man who had once been cashier at a musical bank was out of the field for other employment, and was genuinely unfitted for it by reason of the course of treatment which was commonly called his education. In fact, it was a career from which retreat was virtually impossible, and into which young men were generally induced to enter before they could be reasonably expected, considering their training, to have formed any opinions of their own. Not unfrequently, indeed, they were induced by what we in England should call undue influence, concealment, and fraud. Few indeed were those who had the courage to insist on seeing both sides of the question before they committed themselves to what was practically a leap in the dark. One would have thought that the caution in this respect was an elementary principle, one of the first things that an honourable man would teach his boy to understand, but in practice it was not so. I even saw cases in which the parents brought the right of presenting to the office of cashier at one of these banks with a fixed determination that some one of their sons, perhaps a mere child, should fill it. There was a lad himself growing up with every promise of becoming a good and honourable man, but utterly without warning concerning the iron shoe which his natural protector was providing for him. Who could say that the whole thing would not end in a lifelong lie and vain chafing to escape? I confess that there were few things in Erewhon which shocked me more than this. Yet we do something not so very different from this even in England, and as regards the dual commercial system, all countries have, and have had, a law of the land and also another law, which, though professedly more sacred, has far less effect on their daily lives and actions. It seems as though the need for some law over and above, and sometimes even conflicting with the law of the land, must spring from something that lies deep down in man's nature. Indeed, it is hard to think that man could ever have become man at all, but for the gradual evolution of a perception that though this world looms so large when we are in it, it may seem a little thing when we have got away from it. When man had grown to the perception that in the everlasting is and is not of nature, the world and all that it contains, including man, is at the same time both seen and unseen, he felt the need of 2 rules of life, one for the seen and the other for the unseen side of things. For the laws affecting the seen world he claimed the sanction of seen powers. For the unseen, of which he knows nothing save that it exists and it is powerful, he appealed to the unseen power, of which again he knows nothing save that it exists and is powerful, to which he gives the name God. Some Erewhonian opinions, considering the intelligence of the unborn embryo that I regret my space will not permit me to lay before the reader, have led me to conclude that the Erewhonian musical banks, and perhaps the religious systems of all countries, are now more or less of an attempt to uphold the unfathomable and unconscious instinctive wisdom of millions of past generations, against the comparatively shallow consciously reasoning and ephemeral conclusions drawn from that of the last 30 or 40. The saving feature of the Erewhonian musical bank system, as distinct from the quasi-idolatrous views which coexist with it, and on which I will touch later, was that while it bore witness to the existence of a kingdom that is not of this world, it made no attempt to pierce the veil that hides it from human eyes. It is here that almost all religions go wrong. Their priests try to make us believe that they know more about the unseen world than those whose eyes are still blinded by the seen can ever know, forgetting that while to deny the existence of an unseen kingdom is bad, to pretend that we know more about it than its bare existence is no better. This chapter is already longer than I had intended, and I would like to say that in spite of the saving feature of which I have just spoken, I cannot help thinking that the Erewhonians are on the eve of some great change in their religious opinions, or at any rate in that part of them which funds the expression through their musical banks. So far as I could see, fully 90% of the population of the metropolis looked upon these banks with something not far removed from contempt. If this is so, any such startling event as is sure to arise sooner or later may serve as a nucleus to a new order of things that will be more in harmony with both the heads and hearts of the people. End of chapter 15.